Seeing homeless people on the street made me think about who they are, why are they living like that, what happened to make them homeless. These questions are difficult to answer as the facts regarding homelessness are vast. In this documentary, I've tried to highlight the emotion, reasons, and reality of being homeless. Visiting Catchinglives has enabled me to interact, connect, and communicate with the staff, two of whom have first-hand experience of being homeless.
It's about 85% male to female ratio, and typically between the ages of 18 and 50.
The primary reason for homelessness is what we call relationship breakdown. It's your relationship breaking down with your family, your marriage, or your relationship with your partner falling apart, and that's why the majority of people become homeless.
You know, people who become homeless, if you don't have a mental health problem before you become homeless, you're more than likely to start suffering with some mental health issues once you become homeless, because it's so stressful. And the same goes with substances as well. I mean, the great majority of the population in this country use some sort of substance on a weekly, if not daily basis. The only difference between them and somebody who's homeless is that they have a home, so they're able to manage whatever substance they're using.
What you're talking about is a traditional stereotype of a homeless person. What in the old days used to be called a tramp. That somebody who was homeless was dirty, smelly, didn't look after themselves. You know, as far as the people that I see are concerned, I have 3 showers in this building, and I take clothes donations, and I have 2 washing machines. So nobody that uses my service has to be dirty, and most people don't choose to be dirty. You know, so that traditional stereotype doesn't hold true in the main.
When one sees somebody begging in the street, one should not automatically assume that that person is homeless. There are significant numbers of people who will have accommodation and are using begging as a way to gain income.
For example, people who are begging on the streets, not everybody is homeless. They may just need the money to fulfill a substance misuse addiction, for example. So the fact that they've got a dog and they're sitting on the street and they look scruffy, maybe is a bit of a decoy.
No. There are some people in this country that still believe that rough sleepers and homeless people have dogs because they get extra money. That's just entirely not true. There is no extra money available. If you have a dog, it's going to cost you more money. You don't get any extra benefits for it. Now, the reason homeless people have dogs is very, very simple. Twofold. 1, for protection, and 2, because they give you unconditional love, unconditional affection. A dog doesn't care what you smell like. It doesn't care what your history is. It doesn't care whether you're a criminal or an alcoholic or a drug user. Your dog loves you. And that's the only place they get unconditional affection, because mostly they're treated like shit by by society in general. People, you walk past homeless people like they're invisible, you know, and you have a dog because your dog loves you and doesn't care anything about you and does not judge you, which 95% of the rest of society do. That's why people have dogs. To decrease the number of homeless people, the bottom line is we need more houses, we need more accommodation. Without it, it is just going to get worse. You know, the economic situation is going to stay as it is for a while. Without a lot more housing being built, the situation is just going to get worse. And as far as some of the more entrenched rough sleepers, people who've been doing it for a while, we need specialist services. We need specialist high support accommodations to get some of our more entrenched rough sleepers off the streets. Without that, the problem is just going to continue and to get worse.
I don't think there's any, you know, if you wanted to be selfish and not care about homeless people, it's unlikely to affect you significantly. You're not going to notice any sort of significant primary effect against you as a person if you do or don't care about homelessness.
Because it could be you. Why should you care about homeless people? Because it could be you. It could be your son. It could be your grandson. It could be your sister. It could be your mother. It could be anybody. It only takes, you know, a bereavement, a mental health breakdown. You know, there are so many things that can affect the way people are, people's mental health, you know, people's lives, you know. You know, the time I've been doing this work, I've seen all sorts of people come through the services that I run. You know, from, you know, former priests to former university lecturers to area managers of multinational companies to men who've had millions of pounds to people who've been horribly. It can happen to anyone.
My name's James Duff,
My name's Terry Gore,
and I am Chairman of Trustees here at Catchinglives.
and I'm the service manager of Catchinglives, which is a Canterbury-based homelessness charity.
My drinking became problematic, and combination of my drinking and my stress, my anxiety led to me losing my job, losing my flat, and left me. I ended up on the streets. I spent about 2 years street homeless, and eventually I ended up here in Canterbury and stayed at the night shelter, and that was when I started to change things, turn things around.
I became homeless in 1993. You know, ostensibly, I lost my accommodation. The reason I lost my accommodation was because I was I lost my job, and I lost my job because I was convicted of stealing from my employer. I'd had an alcohol problem from a very young age.
I was on benefits, so my benefits money paid for a lot of stuff. I had savings, I had credit cards, so I got into debt to pay for the things I needed. I mean, really, the only things I was buying was cigarettes and tobacco. Food is relatively easy to come by, and everything else is easy to get. It was really all I was spending my money on was alcohol and tobacco, really.
The first year I sold travel cards. I used to collect travel cards from people coming back from London in the afternoons. I was a rough sleeper in London, on the outskirts of London, and I used to collect those travel cards and then resell them to people going out in the evening. That was the first year. Next 18 months I sold the big issue. I discovered the big issue, and that kept me going for a year and a half, and then I became a golf caddy. Got a lot of cash in hand work working on a golf course. The sea change was, put simply, that I'd had enough. I'd had enough of the way I was living. I'd had enough of that life. I got off the street before I stopped drinking, and my life had reached a point where it was going to go one of two ways. I had an opportunity to be in full-time employment and to have the opportunity to rebuild a life. Or I was going to go back to rough sleeping and live a life that I loathed. And I made the choice, and I made the right one.
Got lots of family, but I tended not to try and think about it too much because it can be quite upsetting. But it's their help, not necessarily the help you might think you want, which is why I was on the streets rather than stay at my mum's or stay at my sister's or my cousin's, because no offer is ever without ties, and I found it easier to be on the streets than to be staying with anyone I knew.
I've got a family, but when you're sort of in that situation, well, for me personally, my mother particularly was part of the underlying issue that led to me becoming homeless. And there's also, as there always would be in a situation like that, an element of shame. I was ashamed of what I'd become, and so I didn't have any contact with my family from 1993 when I became homeless until 2012. I mean, if you want to talk to people, there are, people will talk to you every day. I mean, wherever you happen to be a rough sleeper, as I was, you're spending time out on the street, you get to know, what they're, if you like, the street community, you get to know all of the street drinkers, you get to know the other rough sleepers, you get to know all the drug addicts, the shoplifters, the people that spend a lot of their time out on the street. So, I mean, in that respect, there's a sense of community. But as far as the general public are concerned, except when I was selling the big issue, not a great deal.
I remember once, it was very early in the morning, maybe 5-6 o'clock in the morning. I'd woken up, I was freezing cold, and I was shaking because I needed a beer. And I remember seeing a guy who I sort of knew a bit, and he gave me a beer, and at the time that was what I needed. So yeah, that was one of the best things, because I badly needed a beer. It was that was probably one of the best things.
Best thing when I was a rough sleeper was Christmas dinner. There was one lady I came to know through my time on the street who invited me home for Christmas dinner, and a few times I was given a bed for the night by people that didn't know me from Adam, who just saw my situation. And when you consider all of the implications of that, they were very definitely the best things that I was given.
Yeah, there are times, there were some good times. There were some fun times. I had some friends, and we used to hang out, and it was quite cool at times. But also, I have I have responsibilities now that I didn't used to have. And there are times when, being homeless is much easier when you have nowhere to be. You have no roots, you have nobody who notices. You can do what you like, and you vanish for days or weeks on end, and it makes no difference because nobody's looking for you. I couldn't do that now.
That's it's a simple enough question to answer. No, I don't. Too much, just too much shit. Too many bad memories. There was, had my nose broken twice. There's all sorts of stuff that I do not miss. So it's a very simple question. That I do not miss that life. Worst things about being homeless? Being invisible. The fact that people walk past you and don't acknowledge your existence. You know, the vast majority of members of the public walk past homeless people or people they perceive to be homeless and will deliberately avoid eye contact with them, will deliberately avoid interacting with them because of fear, because of not wanting to associate or for a variety of reasons. And that for me was the worst thing. My message, if I have a message, it's this: anyone can become homeless. Okay, that rough sleeper that you see out on the streets could be your mum, could be your dad, could be your brother, you know, could be your sister. Anybody can become homeless, and all I would ask is that you don't make the experience of being homeless or being a rough sleeper any worse than it has to be. You know, the worst thing for me about being homeless is being invisible. You know, and people ignoring you. You know, people acting as though you're not actually there. So all I would ask people to do is to acknowledge people that they see. You know, if somebody asks you, you know, for some money, I'm not asking you to give them money. Just saying, you know, make eye contact. Say no thanks, mate. If somebody asks you for a copy of The Big Issue, if you don't want to buy it, fine. Just say no thanks, mate. Not today. You know, don't make the experience of being in that situation any worse than it has to be, because it could be you. It can happen to anyone.